Okay, Gabby, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I think one of the first times we met was I think you were having a worldwide freedom rally in Ackworth. Is that what that was?
Yeah, it was like Worldwide Freedom Day and no one was doing anything. And me and another friend said, well, we should do something. And yeah, on like 2 weeks notice, we got about 100 people in our golf course in Ackley and you spoke and a few others. And I know Lindsay Mayer spoke for Informed Choice Iowa. And yeah, that was a great event.
Yeah, that was amazing. And my first introduction to ICI was at a rally, I believe, about the vaccine passport ban bill. Or no, maybe it was before that because then I spoke on that bill about the exemptions in it. But I was really inspired by what you guys or what you ladies were doing. So tell us about ICI a little bit.
Yeah, so they were started by a group of moms. They kind of noticed what was happening in California with all of the medical freedom bills actually taking away your medical freedom essentially and trying to remove the religious exemptions, the medical exemptions. And so they just started going to the Capitol. Now it is a full nonprofit organization. We host an annual conference every year. So the first one was in 2017. We had them all throughout COVID. So even though we had to shelter in place and 6 feet distance. We had 700 people packed into a room talking about medical freedom and health awareness. And that was probably my favorite conference of all.
Who were some of your speakers?
Yeah. So the first year we kicked it off with a bang and we had RFK Jr. come and speak. He has been a very loud proponent of medical freedom, multiple books wrote. He did a lot of research in mercury. And so then mom started getting to him about, you should look into the mercury and vaccinations. And so he's done a lot of great work for the vaccine awareness. We have Del Bigtree. He's a crowd favorite. He spoke at three of the conferences. Ben Tapper has been there. We've had, oh gosh, trying to think who else has all been at the conference. Now, Brian Hooker, he's been a great one there as well.
Well, that's amazing. I love RFK Jr.
Hmm.
An amazing force for good. So I think I might have to make the next one. When is the next one?
Yes, October 19th. So mark your calendars. We don't have all of our speakers locked in yet, so we're not going to announce too many details, but you can at least get it on your calendar so you don't double book yourself.
Awesome, awesome. Moving forward, what have been your focuses the last couple of sessions and this coming or this session? What is your main focus?
Yeah, so legislation is a big part of ICI as well. Not only from an educational piece of informing people with the conference, but we also try to make change with the legislation too. And so we've transitioned away from, like you mentioned, the vaccine passport and moving away from that. It is still something we would love to see. We think we do need more medical freedoms. I think a lot of people believe we shouldn't even need to file an exemption form. I should be able to just say, no, I don't want a vaccine and carry on with life. But right now, a couple of the priorities we are working on, the one is to allow or is to require schools to disclose medical and religious exemptions. So right now it is an Iowa code, religious and exemptions are allowed. And then also in a lot of school board policies, because it is state law, we have to put it in our school board policies. I am a school board member, and so one of my jobs as a school board member is to make sure we are all following the policies. Luckily, at my school, we did get it changed, and they are disclosing anytime they talk about vaccinations needed for school that religious and medical exemptions are allowed. But there are a lot of schools that don't disclose that properly, and they aren't giving full parental transparency. So we did have a subcommittee meeting on this a couple weeks ago. I know you attended that one as well. And multiple parents had said that their school sends out paperwork that says no shots, no school on it. So it's not that they aren't even explaining the exemptions, they're straight up lying to parents about it.
Yeah, that struck me as concerning that some of the people in opposition to the bill, it was like their strategy to increase vaccination rates or to keep them from falling was to lie to parents or to hide the truth
Hmm.
and the law, the current, legalities of it from parents.
Yeah, and luckily on this bill, there wasn't a lot of opposition. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We're not changing the law. We're not saying that we don't want these shots to be required for school. We're not trying to tackle that at all. We're just saying we want you to disclose the law. And it's such a common sense bill, and it's actually quite silly. We have to make a law that says you have to properly disclose the law. But parents go to social media websites. They do online registration. Read articles in the newspaper. The one that I think aggravates me the most personally is when the school does have an audit and the nurse finds out that they don't have either the vaccine form or the religious or medical exemption on file. And they send the parents a letter or an email saying your child has to be vaccinated by this date or they can't attend school anymore. And, we only had about 14 hours notice before that subcommittee hearing to send out a call to action. We had over 30 public comments on there. And there was a handful of comments that said that they only vaccinated their kids because the school told them they had to.
Wow.
And as a school board member, my role is not public health. That is the decision that the parents should be making. Not only should there be informed consent, but there needs to be parental transparency. And so this is a really straightforward bill. It actually passed the full education committee on the Senate side last week. So it's now going to the floor. So it survived the first funnel. So that's always really exciting when you can get a bill past that milestone.
That is exciting, and like you said, it's a pretty simple bill, and it doesn't change the law, and it just adds another layer of transparency, which is always
Mm-hmm.
good. Yeah.
Yep.
So how can we support that?
Yeah, so that one right now, we'll have to get it past the full Senate. So once it goes to floor for debate, and then we'll do that whole process again on the House side. So we'll be sending out call to actions again once we get it over onto the House for them to hold a subcommittee on that bill. But I would say if you're talking to your legislator at any time, if you are a parent, and it also doesn't hurt to talk to your school either. We have had some success with some parents reaching out to us saying my school's not disclosing it properly. And some schools have been able to change it without us having to change the law. So definitely continue to advocate for that any way you can. And just tell parents also if anyone asks you questions. That surprisingly is one of the most popular questions that I get is how does your daughter go to school? Because she's not vaccinated. They only know that because I obviously speak out quite a bit about this topic, but it's pretty easy. You don't need to have a 100-word essay or anything signed by your priest, pastor, minister. You can just get your exemption notarized. Or if you do have a child that has some health issues, that there are ingredients in the vaccine that has caused reactions in the past, you can get a medical exemption from your doctor. That's great as well. I would recommend keeping the original and giving the school a photocopy. There have been instances where the schools misplace them. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's just always good to keep that original record for yourself.
For sure. And what was the other bill? The was it HSB 6? Oh no, it was the HPV and Hep B bill.
Yes. So that bill, that one really stems back to, 30 some years ago when the Act of 1986 was passed. Ronald Reagan signed the National Vaccine Injury Compensate or Injury Plan or Injury Act. And so with that, it did a few different things. First, it removed all liability from the pharmaceutical companies and the manufacturers. So to my knowledge, the vaccine industry is the only industry that has that full blanket liability. They can put out any vaccine, and as long as it's on the childhood schedule, they cannot be sued for any injuries or death that happens. And so, with that act, it also created VAERS, the Vaccine Event Reaction System. So that's where you can report your reactions. A lot of times we hear that vaccines are safe and effective. Well, with VAERS, there has been over $5 billion paid out. And so obviously there is some injury and harm that is coming from these vaccinations. But the thing that we are focusing on with this bill and that ties back to the federal law is that when that was signed in 1986, it required parental consent before vaccinations were given. And currently in Iowa, a minor can consent to a vaccine that is related to a sexually transmitted disease. So that would be your Hep B or your Gardasil or the HPV vaccine. And so those two right now, a child could go in for a back to school physical or a sports checkup, and the doctor could give that to the child without any knowledge from the parent or any consent from the parent either. And so that's what we're trying to change with this bill. I know there was a little bit of opposition on this one as well. Someone made the comment that Title 10, the federal law, does require minors to be able to get accommodations for sexually transmitted diseases. And there are other things that you could do that don't require parental consent. But right now in Iowa, there are only 8 people that are taking part of Title 10. And so out of those 8 people versus however many thousands there are in the state otherwise, it's breaking the federal law with parental consent for any vaccine.
I was pretty shocked when I found out that kids were getting vaccinated without their parents' consent. And the
I think a lot of people
pressure is
were.
immense.
It is. And I mean, I know just being a new time, like first time mother going in, I was 30 when I had my daughter, and we went into the doctor's office, and it's intimidating to be a mom telling a doctor, no, I don't want this. I can't imagine the pressure of a, you know, 12 to 18 years old trying to make that decision. And they might not know if they're allergic to something in it or, why a parent wouldn't want them to get this. But yeah, that was a big shock, I think, to a lot of people that parents don't have any say in this vaccination being given to their children.
Yeah, and it's pressure on the dads too. I mean, I've taken my daughter or my kids to physicals, and they always try to push the HPV vaccine. And at one point, I just called ahead and said, "Hey, we're not interested. Don't want to have that conversation." Okay, we'll put it in your chart. Well, we get there, and the syringe is sitting on the counter as if she's just going to give it to my daughter. And I'm like, "Hey, we had this conversation," and she's like, "Oh, let me go check," as if she has to go get permission to honor my request.
Yeah.
So I was really happy that you guys were addressing this because it is a big problem. And where is that at in the process now?
Yep. So that passed the subcommittee. So we're waiting for that to go to the full committee. So that's going to run through Health and Human Services. And, your story wasn't the only one shared that day. There was another girl that spoke, and the Gardasil vaccine came onto the market in 2006. And so this person said that they had been fully vaccinated up to that time, and her mom went to the doctor together. And this was in 2007. And her mother told the doctor, this one's just new. We aren't too sure about it. I'd like to learn a little bit more before we give it to her. And the doctor told the mother to go wait in the waiting area. And then the doctor convinced the child to get the vaccine. And so they specifically told the mom to leave. The mom told them prior to leaving, no, I don't want my daughter to have this. And they still took it upon themselves. And so ever since the subcommittee hearing, I've heard more and more stories. I had someone tell me that they went to the doctor's office with their daughter for their sports physical. And so, I mean, those are very simple, check a few things and on your way, but they're utilizing this as that way to get that HPV vaccine pushed. And that's where majority of these stories are coming from, are those annual visits for school. And the mom had told the doctor, we're going to hold off. We don't want to do this one. The doctor looked right at the child and said, you can come back anytime without your mommy and get it if you want.
Oh
It just,
gosh.
it blows my mind that this is happening.
One of the things that always floors me, or at least in these two subcommittees, especially the HPV one, is you guys are so up on all the data. I'm so educated on all the data about the vaccine and about efficacy and about all the things. And you just quote all the studies and the science. And then later I would hear somebody in opposition say, well, you have to disregard the anecdotal evidence. Like you were just telling a
Mm-hmm.
story, and they would say was safe and effective, and this and that. The regular slogans, and you guys really had the facts and the data and everything else.
Yeah. Well, and, also to just sit there and make it seem like that person's story of how this doctor didn't trick them, or not trick them, but convince them to get it, isn't relevant either. And same with yours too. I talk to
Yeah, if I
moms
would have
quite a
left the
bit, and they'll
room, if I would have left the room, I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have just given it to her.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they do that with all the vaccines, and it's not just the HPV one that isn't safe and effective. I mean, every single one of those, we could go through the safety trials or the lack thereof, in my personal opinion. But this one is really about the parental consent and the federal law and how Iowa law is not following that, because it specifically says parents must be given informed consent. Now, I personally would like to see the informed consent be a little bit more than that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that you're supposed to get prior to getting the vaccine. But that isn't even happening in this situation. So,
It's not. I remember when my older kids were younger, occasionally they would give a data sheet or the 8.5 by 11, and I would read the sheet and I would think, well, why do they need this? We're not traveling to another country. We're not, you know, if it's only a 2 week illness that they might not even know they have, why would I want to risk this? So I think
yeah.
that's why they quit giving those sheets out.
Well, if your doctor is not giving that sheet out, they are not following federal law because they have to give that for informed consent according to the Act of 1986. So I don't know what we can do about that. I don't know if that's a Board of Medicine issue or how that would get resolved, but doctors should, at very bare minimum, be giving you that sheet of paper.
Well, they haven't the last few times. Have you
Hmm.
found that with other people too, or?
Um, I don't know. I mean, we don't go to those visits, so fun fact, your chiropractor can actually do your back to school physical. So we don't go to the doctor for those. We have our chiropractor do those visits for us. They can fill out those forms and do those checks. Um, I haven't heard of other people. I'm sure that there are. I've heard more that they give you the sheet after they've already given you the vaccination prior to it, but I haven't heard where they just straight up aren't giving you anything yet. So that's interesting. I think that's something that ICI is going to have to probably do some thinking on for maybe next session.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely important that they give that information out. So where is that bill at again, and where in the process right now?
Yep. So that bill, it did pass the subcommittee 2-1. So now we are waiting for Health and Human Services on the Senate side to have their full committee. So hopefully it will pass there and then go to the Senate floor, and then we'll repeat the process on the House side.
Okay. And is that something we might look for next week or?
I haven't heard. I'm hoping next week it can go to the full committee. And I'm not sure where the House bills are at. We do have companion bills on the House side already, so technically doesn't have to go all the way through the Senate. We have them running on both sides of the Capitol right now, which is always nice that we can get them started so we're not having to file them all. So definitely more dates to come on that. Right now, we don't have a lot of call to actions. We are running a third bill on the IRIS system, and so that is where all of our vaccination data is stored. We are trying to get it changed that people can opt out, so that way their information isn't in that database. But we haven't heard that any subcommittee hearings are being scheduled for that right now.
Okay, yeah, and if you could give us a list, you can message me a list of the bill numbers, and I'll be
Yeah,
glad to put it in the description. And we were talking about
yeah.
this blood bank bill as well. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that is one. I can't remember who is running that bill, but it's on the Senate side. That has a subcommittee, I believe, at 3 o'clock on Monday. So that would be January 5th. And it would require Iowa blood banks to allow you to bank your own blood. Prior to COVID, I don't know if that was as big of a deal, but I know it's something that I've started thinking about a little bit more. If I would need a blood transfusion, um, we just don't know how that COVID vaccine interacts with the blood and when you extract it and when you give it. So, if I could get a transfusion from someone that I know in my family or be able to bank my own blood, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. And you
Yeah.
have a,
But the one thing we do have coming up,
that's
yeah,
what I
go
was going
ahead.
to mention. No, I was going to, you go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Our next big day is February 12th. We're having our annual day at the Capitol. So we invite everyone to come down. And February is Vaccine Injury Awareness Month also. So if you do have a story of a vaccine injury, and this could be any vaccine, not just HPV, even though that is one that we do have a bill focusing on this year. But if your child got vaccinated to go to school, or just any, they got the MMR and something changed, parents know. And again, you can't technically prove it. There's a lot of toxins in this world nowadays. And so you don't know what that one thing is that tips that bucket. But, if you have a story, or from COVID also, we have a form on our website. We'll have it on our Facebook page, and I think we'll have you share it as well. We want you to give that information. It can be anonymous, but we want to gather stories from Iowans to give to our legislators, to let them know that injuries aren't minimal. Like, it is happening. Everything isn't safe and effective, and we can't just blanket all of it.
For sure. And we'll either provide a link or have a link on the screen for that. So yeah, if you just want to send those to me, that would be great. And on the 12th, when does that start, and what are the activities of the day?
Yep. So we'll have a table set up in the rotunda, and we'll have some information there. We don't have any speakers lined up, but it is just a great time for us to, if you're new to the Capitol and you haven't been there before, it can be intimidating to call your representative or senator out. So we'll have people there that can help you do that, and even just stand there to help you share your story with your legislator. You can network with other people. I have found that that is the part of ICI that I have really come to enjoy the most. I would not have met any of these people that I talk to now if it wouldn't have been for that conference. And it just also helps you just be more confident in the decisions you're making. Like, you have that gut instinct that God gave you to know that, I don't want to give my child all of these vaccines. There's something inside of me saying, no, I'm not too sure about this. But it is intimidating when you go into that doctor's office. So now when you come to these events, you talk to other parents, you hear their stories, it helps you build that confidence to say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm sorry, I've done this research. This isn't a decision that I want to make for my family.
That's incredibly important, that support system, and that idea that you're not the odd person out because you're having concerns about it. I know when I was in my 20s, having my older kids when they were younger, I had those. I knew that something wasn't right, but I didn't have that support or community, and then you have the pressure from family and everything. So it's difficult for young people when they're having children to know what's best, and especially when now I think it's a little bit easier. We have organizations like ICI, and we have, especially since COVID, and we've seen how unsafe and ineffective these things can be, right out in the public eye. So hopefully that'll help create an even greater change and awareness for people.
Yeah, COVID had a silver lining for sure, with the awareness that it brought to people that would have never even dipped their toe into the vaccine hesitancy, ballpark. I myself have been told that I was going to kill my daughter as well as others because I wasn't vaccinating her. Um, that person has since had a full 360 after COVID. It has opened their eyes to a lot more. And, being a parent is hard, and you want to do what is best for your child. And there's so much information, and you want to trust your doctor. And I don't want this to appear that I'm bashing doctors. That is not, we have so many great doctors in this state and the country, but you only know what you know. And if what you know is what you're being taught at school, and a pharmaceutical rep is coming in and telling you that the vaccine schedule is what you need to follow, they're not giving you any information on the safety studies. They're not showing you ACIP committee hearings. I mean, that was one that I think opens people's eyes when I believe it was for Hep B. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look to see. But they were talking about adding it to the childhood vaccination schedule. And one of the people on the committee said, have there been other countries that have given this in conjunction with other vaccines? And they said, yes, but we don't have any data on it. So we'll look at research after we've already been releasing it to the public and giving it to people. We don't have that information ahead of time. But someone from the ACIP committee said that our theory on these vaccines is that you can give them in your arm and your leg, so different limbs in the same office visit, and that's okay.
Hmm.
If that doesn't make you pause for a second and go, I'm pretty sure my arm and leg are connected to the same body. Like just those little things like that that make you just sit and ponder for a second. Maybe I don't want to do what they're telling me.
Right, right. Not building a lot of trust there. So what's next?
Mhm.
What's next
Which is
for?
hard. You want to trust your doctor.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I think the trust is very low now, but you do want to, and I think that people are now being more selective in who their physician is, making sure they try to find someone that has aligning values maybe and is more open to conversation.
Yep. And we've seen them too venture out on their own also. I think that COVID's helping make this new wave of medicine where, it's not just about who can cover my health insurance, who will listen to me as a parent, look at my symptoms and not just say, here's a pill, here's a shot. Let's get a little more functional with our medicine. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I think that
yeah.
it's been a pleasure. I appreciate everything ICI does. I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we wrap up, but
Yeah, there's one other event that we're going to help be involved in this year, June 22nd. The Vax Bus is going to be coming to West Des Moines. So if you aren't familiar with the Vax Bus, Del Bigtree and Andy Wakefield did this, oh gosh, 5, 6 years ago already now. Maybe it's been longer. I can't remember. But what that is it's a bus that tours the nation and they talk to parents. And so you get to go on the bus, you get to tell your story about your child. Um, if you do want to watch the first one, I would highly recommend not watching it with your kids. I can feel tears coming on just thinking about some of these stories that these parents have told from their children being vaccinated. But they're doing Vax 2.0. So that will be in West Des Moines, June 22nd. I'm not positive on the location, but more to come for that. So a few dates that we have some things throughout the year to come and get evolved and, just network and meet some new people and help be part of the mission. So if you are interested in volunteering, we're always looking for help. Legislative session is really busy, and especially this year with it being an election year, we like to vet the candidates to make sure you know who is standing for medical freedom. So if you have any, skills in Excel or anything like that, you want to do some social media posts, we are always happy to have more people help us. So,
yes, people, you need to get involved. It's time. When is now a good time?
yep.
All right.
We
Well,
were born for a time such as this.
we are born for a time such as this, and it is an interesting time. So, thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for everything you do. And we'll
Yeah,
make sure we get those dates listed and the events
perfect.
listed and some links because, it's really important that we have a group like yours on the front line fighting for our medical freedom. It's so important, especially right now where it's just so easy for companies to just take advantage of the population, and now we've seen it right in front of
Hmm.
our faces these last couple of years. So yeah,
Yep.
thank you so much. God bless you. Have a
Excellent.
wonderful day.
Yes. Thanks, Oliver.